It's May the 4th, so what better way to celebrate than with a lesson all about hyperspace? No, like seriously, there's no better way. In fiction, hyperspace relates to higher dimensions, parallel universes, and faster than light travel. Hyperspace is a higher dimensional space where 2 points can be brought closer together because of the way 3D space is distorted on this higher plane. Now, there are 2 types of distortions: folding and mapping. Folding hyperspace brings distant points closer together. Robert Heinlein describes it as crumping paper in his 1953 novel Starman Jones. I have a pre-crumpled piece of paper. Let's ignore that. Yeah, we've all seen the wormhole thing, you know, like fold a piece of paper over, stick a pen through, a tunnel, great. Crumping is messing it up so that your normally flat plane of space actually now is a little bit scrunchier, a little bit shorter distance between points because of all the crunchy bits. Anywho, mapping hyperspace story is depicted as a parallel universe that is smaller than ours. It could be in a different shape, but it allows a shortcut between points in our universe. Now, different stories deal with hyperspace in slightly different ways, depending on the folding or mapping style, the energy and location requirements of entering hyperspace, its size, whether it has inhabitants. But in general, in sci-fi, subspace, jump space, end space, Q space, tau space, it's all hyperspace. Now, despite its emergence in the 1930s and its use by many science fiction writers, including Isaac Asimov's classic Foundation series written in the 50s, and despite the fact that by the 60s and the early 70s it was a staple of the sci-fi genre and the most popular method of FTL travel, it is undoubtedly most famous because of Star Wars. In Star Wars, hyperspace requires hyperdrives that generate FTL travel. Hyperspace itself isn't what allows for traveling faster than light. You have to be able to do that already to enter hyperspace. What it does do is it creates shortcuts, or hyperspace lanes, that allow you to get between points over a shorter distance. Now, to get into hyperspace, the hyperdrive has to manipulate hypermatter particles. Come on! Star Wars seems to use the mapping version of hyperspace, where each point in real space is associated with a unique point in hyperspace. However, our universe casts shadows on hyperspace, so that you could still crash into a star, hence the need for good hyperspace navigation. So what about real good old-fashioned science? So hyperspace did originate as a mathematical term relating to higher dimensional space, although it's not really used much anymore. It came about in around 1866 in geometry, and it meant imaginary space of more than 3 dimensions. While science doesn't regularly use the term hyperspace these days, its definition connects it to string theory. The idea started when Theodore Kaluza found a way to unify gravity with the other physical laws. But for it to work, our space needs to have higher dimensions. And these dimensions are compactified. Basically, they're curled up too small to see, whereas our normal 3 plus time are extended. Think about a rod. Oh, and stand on it. Now, you standing on this rod, from your perspective, the dimensions or the directions that you can travel in are forward and backward. But what if this rod is actually a teeny tiny curled up cylinder? Now, there is another direction going around the cylinder, but you can't access it. To you, it's undetectable. It's kind of the general idea. Now, there are multiple versions of string theory, with M theory being a potential unification of them all. And something that comes up in a few versions is Brane cosmology. Before we go any further, Brane is spelled B-R-A-N-E. It's not a brain. Now, if these extra dimensions are compact, then they would be contained within our observable universe. If they're not, or if at least one of them is actually larger than us, then that dimension is referred to as the bulk, hyperspace. Our 3-dimensional universe is a brane inside this bulk space. So this bulk space is the hyperspace that you would travel through. In fact, there are some models that suggest bulk space is what the singularity of a black hole points towards, and that two could eventually break through and meet and form a wormhole, a central plot point to the movie Interstellar. So hyperspace is in truth a mathematical tool for imagining higher dimensions of space, and its use in string theory to represent a bulk space is more in line with how fiction has depicted it for over 100 years now. But all that really matters at the end of the day is that the Millennium Falcon did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. May the 4th be with you, nerds.